So at this point in the class, I'd give you the opportunity and give you some time to finish Lab 12 in class. And I put links here to each of those 5 things that you are to complete. And each of these links goes to the specific YouTube video that you are to follow. So again, horizontal movement on scroll, you saw that on part 1 video. Rotation on mouse over, you're going to imitate this credit card looking thing that rotates when your mouse moves on it. You're going to move or emulate the scroll progress indicator, except here in the video they put it on top here, but mine is at the bottom. And then for the show and hide nav bar, I did just a generic nav bar at the top. They did this little drop one here. And then finally, the reveal elements on scroll, where you have these pictures that reveals when you scroll down the page. Now this effect here, we're going to pause and ask the question, how can we do that using plain vanilla JavaScript? And I'll get to that in a moment. And obviously this is the slide that I would normally display and give you some time to submit the lab and a break. So let me just quickly go over my Twitter links that I found interesting. So I don't know if you've heard this CSS Houdini at all, but this apparently could change the way we write CSS and manage CSS in the future. So keep your eye on this Houdini stuff, and it would be wise to read that article. Here's another link, everything I know about freelancing, in case you wanted to start your own business, and here's some tips and tricks for this one person's opinion. And then here is a cool link that I saw. It's a framework that allows you to create interactive music in the browser. So if I click on demos here, there's this really neat one that I saw regarding rhythm. I think it was was it this one, learning music? Drums, bass, make beats. Let's make beats. Play. And you can add different squares. That's pretty cool. Although there was another one that I saw that was kind of fun too. Chrome Music Lab? Yes, and then this is a rhythm one that had some animation as well, which is kind of funny. So you just add the different dots and triangles. Anyways, so just have fun with that. What else? Yeah. So let's pretend the break is over. And the next concept is how to detect that scrolling effect with the images in plain JavaScript. And let me just say there's 2 ways currently. There's the old way and the new way. And I've created a couple of code pens to demonstrate. So here, I just put a lot of text, and as you can see when I scroll down, the images slowly come into place. So how did I do that using the old way? So let's just take a look at the HTML for a second. Here's my lorem ipsum, and then every once in a while I'll just insert an image in between paragraphs. Here, the important thing is that the images start off with an opacity of 0, but it's still there. What else? I also start them off a bit to the right, so that when they finally get the class added in, it goes back to its normal resting position with an opacity of 1. And then the JavaScript, here's the old way of doing it. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting all the image tags, and then eventually what I'm doing is at the bottom here, I'm listening for a scroll event. So every time I scroll, it's listening for that scroll, and then it's going to run my function every time it does scroll. What is this? 20. Actually, that 20 should not be there. There we go. So this function, where is that? That's right, this one right here. And so what's going to happen is it's going to run, each time I scroll even just a little tiny bit, it's going to run this function. It's going to look at all the images that I query selected. And for each image, which now is labeled slider image, we're going to do the following calculations. So we're going to basically calculate what is the halfway point of that image. And you're doing some basic math here to figure out what the halfway point is. We're adding the scroll Y and the inner height, which basically this equals the entire height of the web page, and doing basically calculating the halfway point. And then you're calculating the bottom of the image here, and then you're just asking the question, is half shown, by asking different things. So at this low level of the old way, you have to know a little bit more math. And then eventually you're going to say, is half shown and is not scrolled past, then you're just going to add the class of active or remove the class of active. And that's what we're doing here. But the new way, as of a little bit over a year ago, there's a new API called the new intersection observer. So I've put a link here into my new CodePen. So what this CodePen, let me just get rid of that one. So this one is the exact same thing as before, and the behavior is exactly the same. But look at the code. So what's new is I'm creating a new intersection observer here by saying new intersection observer. And this is my function that I'm going to define up here that runs every time it scrolls. And some options that I've defined here. And basically this threshold is how fine, let me actually go to MDN for a second. MDN threshold, no, intersection observer. Let's look at what the threshold has to say. Threshold. Here, threshold is either a single number or an array of numbers which indicate at what percentage of the target's visibility the observer's callback should be executed. So you could have, for example, 25% values or increments like that, or we're just doing a simple one here, 0.51. So now we're going to look at this callback function. So this callback function is run each time we're scrolling. It's running, and it's asking the question: is the image intersecting, and is that intersection ratio halfway, or is it, if we put a 1 here, is it fully visible? So watch what happens if I say 1. Now if I scroll, the image doesn't actually come until it's fully visible, like from top to bottom. Whereas with the 0.5, the image should appear halfway there, see? So that's, note the difference. Like, there's not a lot of math that you have to do. It's like, whereas the old one, you have to like know your carpentry, so to speak. Whereas here, you just have to know a few things here, which is nice. And then the final thing I wanted to mention is that if we look the custom cursors. So if we look at back at week 1, I asked you, give me an example of a website that uses animation, and I think one of you told me this one. And when you look at this website now that you've learned a lot of how to animate, and this particular website uses Greenstock, and you could probably figure out how they did it now, except this cursor. Notice this cursor here. A couple things are happening. This, waving line, that's using Canvas under the hood. But besides that, if you look at the cursor, it's just a pink dot. But if you hover over something clickable, the pink dot kind of grows into a circle kind of thing. So I'm gonna show you what I did to emulate that. So here's my example. Let me go to CodePen. So here's my pink dot, and then if I hover over a link here, it grows. So I got this example from this design course, but I totally changed up the cursor to make it look like the Elam Chan ones. So all I did there in the HTML is I had 2 divs going on, and they each had absolute positioning for both of them. And then in the JavaScript, I basically say every time the mouse moves, move both cursors to whatever top and left positioning based on the current cursor. And then the magic is basically, if I'm hovering over a link, so here, if I'm hovering over a link with an anchor tag, then I'll add the expand class, which is defined over here. And so I'm adding basically an animation keyframe, which just scales its 0 to 1. And that's all it is. So, and for that other one here, for the waviness, you could look, if you want to see how they did that, if you look at Wes GitHub JavaScript 30 and look for his canvas example, fun with HTML canvas. Look for his YouTube video on that, and it's really cool. But you can copy this, if you just copy all of that and maybe put it into CodePen and see what it looks like. You should see I'm clicking here, and all kinds of things are happening. So you could learn what he's doing here and then watch his video to see how he did that. But basically this is the same kind of effect as this. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say for this video. Good luck with Lab 12. Again, you can go ahead if you wish and do the week 14 discussion as well, which is what I was going to save for next week anyway. So yeah, email me if you have any questions.